Hi, my name's Donica. On my birthday, I went under anesthesia, trusting my parents would be there when I woke up. They weren't. They left me alone at the hospital during surgery. No call, no explanation, just gone. And what came after? Forged papers, a fake psychiatric file, a family party I wasn't invited tousing my name. But then something happened. A twist no one saw coming. I won the lottery. And I didn't tell a soul. Why would I after everything they tried to erase? What would you do if the people who raised you tried to make you disappear? I woke up early that morning, earlier than usual. The sky was still dark, not yet touched by morning light, and the house sat in that strange, weightless silence that only exists right before dawn. I sat on the edge of my bed, ran a comb through my hair, and reminded myself quietly, so I wouldn't scare the hope away, it's my birthday. I turned 42 today. Not a milestone anyone throws a party for, but still, I thought maybe it would mean something. My parents said they'd pick me up after the procedure, even circled it on the calendar pinned to the fridge back home. I believed them. Foolishly maybe, but I believed them. I packed my overnight bag with the essentials, loose sweatpants, a toothbrush, my copy of To the Lighthouse I never finished, just in case recovery took longer. I even tucked in a little box of the chocolate mints my grandma used to keep in her purse. I'd bought them the day before, hoping they'd sweeten the day, hoping something would. I took a lift to the outpatient center, since Mom said she'd meet me there later. It was cold for late October, the kind of Pittsburgh cold that seeped into your bones and stayed there, even after you came back inside. The check-in process was routine clipboards, signatures, that sterile smell of antiseptic and latex gloves. A young nurse walked me back, her voice calm and cheerful in that overly rehearsed hospital way. I smiled, though it didn't reach my eyes. Lying down under those bright lights, I stared up at the ceiling tiles and whispered one last thought to myself. They'll be here when I wake up. When I came to, the ceiling was blurry. The world felt sideways. My tongue felt thick and dry, like it didn't belong in my mouth. I blinked a few times and tried to focus. The voices around me were muffled, floating in and out of clarity. Donica, a nurse's voice called gently. You're in recovery. How are you feeling? I tried to speak but could only manage a nod. My throat burned. Another nurse handed me a cup with a straw. The water felt like heaven. Do you have someone coming to pick you up? She asked, checking her chart. Yes, my parents, I croaked. They should be here any minute. She gave a polite nod, the kind you give when you don't want to say what you're really thinking. Time dragged like a bad movie stuck on pause. I was wheeled into the recovery lounge, surrounded by the rhythmic beep of machines and the low hum of quiet conversation. Curtains separated me from the rest, but I could still hear the mother patients talking to their family members, exchanging jokes, making plans for dinner. I kept my eyes on the curtain, expecting it to pull back at any second, expecting to see my mom's anxious face, my dad's awkward but familiar smile. But all I got was silence. I checked my phone, no missed calls, no texts, just the same wallpaper, a photo of me and my grandma at the lake, 2 summers before she passed. After an hour, a nurse returned. Still no one? She asked gently. They're probably stuck in traffic, I mumbled, staring at my phone as if I could will a message into existence. Another hour passed, then another. By now, the room had emptied out. Even the man with the double knee brace, whose daughter had been panicking over his pain meds, was gone. I sat there alone in a recliner, my surgical bandage itching against my collarbone, and tried not to cry. The sun had long since set, and someone had dimmed the overhead lights. A new shift had taken over. A cleaning lady rolled in a mop bucket and started wiping down the floors, humming something off-key. I barely looked at her. My body felt like a balloon slowly deflating, the kind that never pops, just shrinks in on itself. She must have thought I was asleep because she turned to another aide and whispered, "They left hours ago." Didn't even ask how she was. Just walked out like she didn't exist. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I just let the weight of that sentence sink in. Didn't even ask. Walked out. Like I didn't exist. I stared at the ceiling again, this time with a new kind of clarity, cold and sharp, like glass under bare feet. So this was it. Not an accident, not traffic, not a miscommunication. They had left me, on purpose. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I drifted in and out, never fully gone, never fully here. The mechanical hum of the recovery ward wrapped itself around me like a too-tight sweater. Around 5 a.m., the nurse on duty brought me some plain toast and tea. I nodded in thanks but barely touched either. My body had healed enough to be discharged, but my mind, my heart was nowhere near recovery. I asked to see the billing paperwork, more out of instinct than anything else. A distraction, something to focus on that didn't hurt so much. The nurse handed over a small manila envelope with a receipt tucked inside. At first, I barely glanced at it. Then something stopped me. The name on the insurance card copy. It wasn't mine. Callista, my sister. I blinked. Surely it was a clerical error. A slip of some bored receptionist's finger. We hadn't shared an insurance plan since I was in my 20s. She lived states away, had her own job, her own life, and we hadn't spoken in almost a year. Not since the Thanksgiving call that ended with her saying, "You never know when to shut up and be grateful." But now, here she was on my medical file. "Excuse me," I asked the woman at the front desk, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why is my sister listed as the insurance holder?" She tapped her keyboard a few times, her expression neutral. "It was entered during your pre-op paperwork, insurance authorization under Callista Fordham. That's your emergency contact, correct?" "No," I said quickly. "I didn't list her. I listed my mother." I reached for my phone to prove it, but the screen remained dark, battery dead. The woman tilted her head. "It's not uncommon for family to provide coverage, especially when authorization is needed in a time crunch. Maybe she helped out?" "She lives in Connecticut," I replied. "She didn't even know I was having this done." The receptionist offered a polite smile. "You can request an update through patient records." Something in her tone told me she wasn't surprised. I walked away without another word, but inside my stomach burned with a quiet, tightening fire. I found the records office down the hall from radiology. A young man behind the desk greeted me with the same chirpy tone I was growing to hate. He asked for ID, then clicked away at his computer. "I'd like to review my file," I said. "The full one, including any legal documents on file." He raised an eyebrow but didn't question it. A few minutes later, he slid a thick folder across the desk. "You'll need to review it in here," he said. "No copies without a supervisor's sign-off." I opened it slowly. The first few pages were nothing routine forms, consent waivers, checklists. Then I saw it. Power of attorney, signed and notarized, in my name. Except it wasn't my signature. Not even close. It was a clumsy attempt at mimicry, something you'd expect from a high schooler trying to forge a permission slip, not from an adult trying to steal someone's legal agency. But there it was, black ink on white paper, a notary seal pressed at the bottom like a cruel joke. I felt the air leave my lungs. They didn't just leave me, they signed me away. The office grew too quiet, too bright. I stood there, unsure of what to do next, when a gentle knock broke the silence. A nurse stood at the doorway, Belinda, I remembered from earlier. She had that kind of face you couldn't forget. Kind, but worn. The kind of woman who'd seen too much and learned to hide it behind polite professionalism. She stepped closer, glancing over her shoulder as if someone might be listening. "You should get a copy of that file," she said, her voice low. I was told I couldn't without a supervisor. She didn't respond to that. Instead, she held something out in her palm, a folded scrap of paper. "Take this, quietly. Don't show it until you're off the property." I took it, fingers trembling, and stuffed it into my coat pocket. Her eyes locked with mine for half a second longer than necessary. "There's more going on than you think," she said. "You didn't hear that from me." And then she left, just like that. I closed the file and handed it back, plastering on the same empty smile I'd been wearing since I woke up. But inside, something shifted. I wasn't scared. Not anymore. I was focused. If they'd already signed me away on paper, what else have they taken? By the time I made it home, the late afternoon light had already begun to slip behind the row houses. My apartment smelled like stale air and unopened mail. I flicked the light on, And the same soft hum from the fridge greeted me, low and indifferent, like a dog that had forgotten your scent. I slid my keys onto the table and winced as I spotted the stack of unopened bills. They'd piled up while I was gone: hospital invoices, insurance notices, an electricity warning. I was used to scraping by, but this time it felt heavier, colder. I'd been cut open, sewn back up, and discarded like old laundry, and now here I was, returning to the exact same silence I'd left behind. Still in my coat, I reached for my phone. It had finally charged enough to turn on. Missed calls, none. Texts, none. But one voicemail. The timestamp read 2 days ago while I was still in the hospital. I tapped it. A breath. Then my mother's voice, low and sharp, like she was talking through gritted teeth. If you know what's good for you, stay quiet. Let it go, Danica. Don't ruin things for the rest of us. That was it. No hello. No how are you feeling. Just that. I sat down on the edge of the couch, not breathing, letting the words echo in my chest like distant thunder. I played it again, then again. Each time, the pit in my stomach deepened. She knew. They all knew. This wasn't panic or ignorance. This was strategy. I wasn't collateral damage. I was the price they were willing to pay. I deleted the voicemail, but only from my phone log, not from my memory. That voice would stay with me now, like a ghost that refused to leave. I changed into an old t-shirt, made myself some toast I didn't eat, and sat at the kitchen table. I opened my laptop, intending to distract myself with emails, maybe a recipe blog, anything not to feel so cornered. But then I made the mistake of opening Facebook. The first thing I saw was a photo, a backyard strung with lights, balloons, a long table dressed with snacks, gifts, and a cake too perfect to be homemade. A banner hung above the porch that read, "Happy birthday, Callista plus Danica." My heart clenched. There were my parents, my sister wearing a peach-colored dress I knew she'd borrowed from me years ago and never returned, a handful of cousins, an uncle I hadn't seen since Dad's retirement party. Everyone, smiling. I blinked. I hadn't received a single message. Not a call, not a text. And yet, there it was. A party in my honor, without me. The caption beneath the photo read, "Family first, always." I laughed once, sharp and bitter. The kind of laugh that isn't joy, just broken noise. I stared at the photo a little longer. Then I clicked save. They wanted the image of me. The idea of me. Enough to make a cake, pose for a photo, and write my name on a banner, but not enough to actually invite me. That was the moment something inside me stopped grieving. Not because I was over it, not because I forgave them, but because I understood. They hadn't forgotten me. They were replacing me. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Proof. Inside it, I dropped the saved photo, the insurance receipt scan I'd taken at the hospital, and a note to myself to retrieve the voicemail from my cloud backup. I wasn't crying anymore. I was documenting, not because I needed revenge, not yet, but because I needed the truth to have a home, one that couldn't be erased, edited, or twisted. I shut my laptop and stared out the window, watching the dusk swallow the skyline in shades of gray. They think they're writing me out, but I'm the one with the pen now. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay on my side, watching the ceiling fan turn slow, each blade carving the silence like a dull knife. I wasn't anxious, I was calculating. There's something about knowing you've been targeted that forces your brain into overdrive. You think about everything differently. You question every memory, every delay, every time someone forgot to loop you in. When morning came, I poured a cup of coffee I never finished and booted up my laptop. I remembered what Belinda had said. I didn't know how deep this went, but I was done guessing. So I logged in to the legal trust portal my family used. Years ago, our family attorney helped set it up back when things felt more whole, more honest. The login still worked. I navigated to the Beneficiaries tab. There it was. Callista primary and sole beneficiary. Me? Nothing. No secondary. No contingency. No footnote. Just erased. There had been a section for me. I remembered that clearly, like the way you remember which direction a picture used to hang after someone tilts it. But it was gone now, as if I'd never been there. The update date was 6 months ago. And next to it, A digital consent signature. Mine. Except it wasn't. It was a shaky, stretched version of my name, the way a kid tries to copy a parent's handwriting, close enough to fool a stranger. But I knew my own curves and lines. I knew I'd never authorized anything. And the name next to the change? Approved by Lorraine Wyatt, my mother. She didn't even try to hide it. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding like it'd run a mile. They'd taken me off the trust, off my own family's future, without a phone call, without a conversation. I wasn't surprised anymore. I was tired of being surprised. I closed the tab and reached for my phone, almost out of habit. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to see, some apology maybe, a missed call, but there was nothing. Instead, I scrolled through Instagram, a reflex I should have learned to resist. And there she was, Callista, grinning beside a fake, wood-paneled backdrop in what looked like a podcast interview. Her hair was curled, her lipstick too bright for her skin tone, and around her neck, my grandmother's locket. It wasn't just any piece of jewelry. It was the one she'd let me wear on my 16th birthday, the one she whispered would be mine someday. I hadn't seen it in years. I thought it was lost after she passed. And now, there it was, resting on Callista's chest, like it had always belonged to her. I zoomed in on the picture. The tiny engraving on the back Marguerite, 1938, confirmed it. It wasn't just the money. They were rewriting the past. And I hadn't even noticed when it started. I shut the app and looked around my apartment. Stacks of old paperwork. Receipts I hadn't thrown away. Birthday cards from 10 years ago tucked in drawers. I started pulling things out every folder. Every piece of mail I'd once shrugged off as unimportant. A pattern emerged. Medical forms that came late. Credit card renewals I never requested. A dental appointment canceled without my knowledge. All little things spread over years. But together, it was a campaign. Not loud, not violent, but methodical. Each move chipped away at my place in the family, my rights, my memories, my proof of existence. By the time the sun dipped again, the coffee in my cup was cold, untouched. My living room looked like a war room. I opened a new encrypted folder on my desktop, labeled it in all caps, Phase 2. And then I started filling it. Legal documents, screenshots, photos, backups, passwords. I wasn't going to confront anyone, not yet. But I wasn't going to be caught sleeping again either. I wasn't collecting ammo. I was building a firewall. They had taken me off paper. Now I was putting myself back on it in places they couldn't reach. They'd made it clear there was no seat at their table for me, so I'd stopped waiting. There's something about pressing save on a folder labeled Phase 2 that changes the rhythm of your thoughts. Not overnight, not in some grand transformation, but gradually, like turning the dial on an old radio until the static fades and the signal comes in clear. By the third morning after the trust discovery, I was restless. Not anxious, just alert. I needed a break. Not from the fight, just from my own thoughts looping back on themselves. So I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I left the apartment without a list, without a purpose, without telling anyone. I ended up at a gas station on the edge of town, the kind with flickering signs, overpriced gum, and a cooler full of mystery sandwiches. I went in for a Diet Coke and came out with a lottery ticket. Impulse, nothing more. The machine near the register blinked red, asking for a zip code. I punched in my old childhood one habit and tucked the ticket in my coat pocket without a second glance. It wasn't until the next evening, after dinner and a shower and another deep dive into my laptop files, that I remembered the slip of paper. I pulled it out. The numbers stared back at me like a dare. I opened the lottery site on my phone, tapped the latest results, and began comparing. One number matched, then 2, then 4. I read them again, slowly, all 6. I didn't scream, didn't laugh. I just sat there on the edge of my bed, blinking at the numbers like they were written in another language. $10 million. 10 million. I set the ticket down on the nightstand and walked away. I didn't touch it again that night. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched. How to claim lottery anonymously in Pennsylvania. That led to articles. Those led to law firms. By midnight, I had an appointment set with an independent attorney downtown, one with no ties to anyone I knew. By 10 a.m. the next day, I was sitting across from a man in a gray suit who who had the kind of voice that made everything sound like a contract clause. He reviewed my situation, then explained how we'd proceed. Blind trust. Assigned trustee. The winnings would be funneled through a structure that protected my identity. No publicity, no headlines, no relatives suddenly remembering me. I listed no next of kin, no beneficiaries, no family. I wasn't building a legacy. I was building a firewall with legs. By the time I left his office, the ticket was no longer mine, not technically. But I'd never felt more in control of something in my life. Back home, I poured myself a glass of water and stood in the middle of my living room, unsure of what to do next. Winning that kind of money is supposed to feel like a movie ending. Confetti, cheers, life solved. But for me, it just felt quiet, like closing a door and locking it from the inside. My phone rang around 3 p.m. The name that popped up made my stomach drop. Mom. I debated letting it ring out, but I didn't. Hello? Her voice was tight, clipped, not warm, not surprised. Just, there, Donica. I heard you've been stirring things up again. Belinda said you were asking about records. That's not helpful right now. I didn't respond. You always misunderstood things, she continued. We only did what was necessary. You're too sensitive. You always have been. I stared at the sunlight hitting my windowsill. We were just trying to protect what's best for everyone. You need to let things go. Dragging this out helps no one. Still, I said nothing. There's no need to be dramatic, she added, like she was discussing a leaky faucet. You've always had a tendency to. I ended the call. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't scream. I saved the voicemail. I labeled it Mom Justification, MP3, and dropped it into phase 2. Then I made tea. I wasn't chasing apologies anymore. I wasn't asking for space or explanations or crumbs. I had a key to a different door now, and I wasn't waiting to be invited in. The next morning, I woke up with a name in my head and a plan in motion. By 9 o'clock, I was dressed in clean jeans, a dark sweater, and a face that didn't invite questions. I'd found a notary's office a few blocks from my building, nothing fancy. Just a 2-story red brick place wedged between a dry cleaner and a vape shop, the kind of spot no one in my family would ever step foot in. I walked in like I belonged there, quiet, direct. I'm here for access to public estate filings, I said, sliding my ID across the counter. The woman behind the plexiglass looked up. Name? I hesitated a breath before saying, Danica Everett. She tapped at her keyboard, adjusted her glasses, and then frowned. Are you sure you're on this one? She tilted the monitor slightly in my direction. My mother's name, my father's, and Callisto, of course, listed as the sole beneficiary. No mention of me, not even a backup clause. No in the event of or should any other children exist, just Callista, as if I had never existed. Then came the final gut punch, a digital signature. My name, perfectly typed, neatly signed, time-stamped 3 months ago. I stared at it like it might blink or glitch and disappear. But it didn't. Can I get a certified copy of this? I asked, voice steady, throat burning. She nodded, printed it, stapled it twice, and slid it into a yellow envelope. Need anything else? I shook my head, but inside the answer was loud and clear. Yes. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, legs tucked underneath me, staring at the envelope like it might set itself on fire. I finally opened it and laid it flat on the table, right next to the other documents I'd started collecting in my binder. I labeled this one, Tab 3, Full Exclusion. It didn't feel like grief anymore. It felt like evidence. I was halfway through bookmarking legal articles on estate fraud when my phone buzzed with a new email. No subject, no name, just, please read this. It's overdue. The sender address was a string of random letters. The body of the message was short, 7 lines. I assisted in your surgery 2 weeks ago. I'm not proud of what I saw. Your family requested prolonged sedation, claimed it was better for everyone if you were kept calm. They didn't want you conscious too early. Didn't want you fighting. I couldn't say anything then. I was new. I was scared. But I've followed your story. I'm sorry. You deserve to know. Burner address. No attachments, no name. I read it twice, then a third time, and then I printed it. I slipped it into the binder, behind the will, and labeled it Tab 4 Medical Interference. This wasn't just betrayal. It was architecture. They had designed this, built it, brick by brick, lie by lie, forged signature by forged signature. I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and started drawing a timeline. 3 months ago, forged will filed. 2 weeks ago, surgery, extended sedation. 1 week ago, inheritance scrubbed, records sealed. Me, removed. They hadn't just taken me off the map, they drugged me unconscious so they could finish the job. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and searched for top estate fraud attorneys in Pittsburgh. I made 3 appointments, then narrowed it to 1. Early the next morning, I met with a woman named Hannah Becker. Late 40s, sharp blazer, no smile. I liked her immediately. I handed her the envelope, then the email, then the medical papers. She didn't interrupt once, just flipped page by page, making notes in the margins with a pen that clicked like a metronome. "This is strong," she said finally. "Is it enough?" "It's enough to start." That's all I needed. I wasn't preparing a confrontation. I was preparing a case. They wanted quiet. They wanted invisible. I was about to become the loudest thing on paper. They tried to silence me. Now they're screaming. I was making breakfast when the knock came, a hard, impersonal rhythm that didn't belong to neighbors or delivery drivers. I peeked through the peephole and froze. A courier in a courthouse vest held up a manila envelope with my full name typed across the front. I didn't open it right away. My fingers hovered over the flap, heart thudding like I'd just run 5 flights. The kettle on the stove clicked off, forgotten. Inside, a petition for mental health evaluation, filed by my parents, signed by 2 neighbors, Barbara and Joe from 3CW who once borrowed sugar and offered holiday cookies, and a psychological affidavit from a Dr. Alan Brenner, a name I'd never heard. The words blurred as I scanned them. Terms like erratic, paranoid, delusional, a list of behaviors attributed to me, half-truths, warped moments, and flat-out fiction. Things I'd said in passing, things taken out of context. One note read, claims of familial conspiracy centered around inheritance. I set the papers down and gripped the edge of the counter, trying to steady myself. The fear didn't land first. The rage did. I knew what this was. They weren't just afraid of me talking. They wanted to declare me unfit to speak. It took me 30 minutes to throw on clothes and drive to the only person who might still be on my side. Aunt Moira lived 15 minutes away, in a neighborhood with trimmed hedges and ceramic lawn rabbits. Her porch light was on when I arrived, though it was midday. I rang once, twice. She answered, apron on, dish towel in hand. She looked older than I remembered, tired maybe. But her eyes were sharp. She didn't step aside to let me in. "Donica?" she said, voice soft. "I figured you'd come." "I need help," I said. "They're trying to commit me." Her lips thinned. She didn't look surprised. That stung more than I expected. "Come in for a minute," she said, turning her back. I followed her to the kitchen, the same lemon-scented warmth from my childhood still lingering. She poured tea without asking. I didn't drink it. "They're worried," she began. "I'm not unstable," I snapped. "You know that." She sighed. "Honey, they said you've been acting erratic, digging into things, making accusations. What was I supposed to think?" "You were supposed to remember who raised me," I said. "Who I've always been." "Not what they say now." She placed her hand over mine. "Maybe just comply. Get evaluated, clear your name the right way. I'm not giving them the power to rewrite my mind, Moira." She pulled her hand back. "I love you, but I can't go against the whole family." That was it. The only branch that hadn't snapped gone. I left without finishing my tea. By nightfall, I was in my apartment with every lamp on, every curtain drawn, binder open on the floor. I called Hannah Becker and told her what had arrived. She asked for scanned copies. By morning, she had filed a counter-petition with a full psychological profile, attached dates, logs, licensed therapist verification. We backed it with every audio file I'd recorded since the first voicemail. No outbursts, no paranoia, just strategy. But logic wouldn't be enough. Truth was never loud unless you gave it a speaker, so I gave it one. I searched my inbox until I found a message from a local investigative journalist named Rochelle James. She'd once emailed me months ago about a story on elder abuse, asking if I'd known anyone affected. I never responded. Now I typed, "There's a woman in Pittsburgh being declared mentally unfit so her family can seize her assets. She's sane, she's got proof, but they're using forged psychiatric records to silence her. I can't give you names, but it's real. If you want a lead, look up filings from the Everett family. The daughter's story is the one no one expected." I hit send. No attachments, no signature. Just a breadcrumb. Let someone else dig now. Let the shadows shrink under exposure. I wasn't hiding. I was watching them panic. They thought pushing me into silence would make them safe. They were wrong. I woke up before dawn, heart steady, hands calmer than they'd been in weeks. The courtroom hearing was scheduled for 10. I didn't touch my phone, didn't scroll, just got dressed, printed the files, and zipped them into a weathered leather folio I hadn't used since my teaching days. As the city yawned awake, I watched steam rise from my coffee, barely sipping it. I'd spent the past 7 days working like a woman possessed, pulling every thread, backing up every file 3 ways, and finally, securing something that made my breath catch when I watched it. A grainy hospital surveillance video, 3 weeks old. I'd requested it through a third-party service on a hunch. Buried in the footage was the time-stamped moment my parents wheeled an empty chair out of the post-op exit ramp alone. No discharge papers, no escort, just the two of them walking briskly through the underground garage, eyes down like they were stealing something, because they were. Me. Frame by frame, I studied their posture. Dad's jaw tight, Mom clutching her purse like it might explode. No sign of confusion, no hesitation. They knew what they were doing, and they didn't care if anyone saw it. That clip, silent and cold, was my shield. I arrived at the temporary courthouse just before 9, slipping into the modest waiting room where my lawyer, Hannah, sat reviewing notes. Her hair was pulled back tighter than usual. No small talk. She simply nodded and gestured for the flash drive. "Ready to make them sweat?" she asked. I didn't smile. I'm ready to be done pretending they ever told the truth. Inside, the judge reviewed the psychiatric filing first, the one claiming I was emotionally unstable, prone to paranoia, detached from reality. Then Hannah rose. "We'd like to enter Exhibit A into evidence," she said, voice clear but never raised. The lights dimmed. The clip rolled. Every eye in the courtroom followed the wheelchair's lonely path through that parking lot. I heard someone behind me mutter, "Is that it?" As if they expected more. That was the point. It was simple, but irrefutable. Then came Raina. She appeared on the screen via live Zoom, seated in a neutral-toned room with a medical ID badge clipped to her chest. The same eyes that once looked at me with quiet empathy now held a different kind of fire. "I was the nurse assigned to Danica Everett's post-op recovery," she said, steady. Her parents asked to be alone with her. When I returned 10 minutes later, she was gone. They told me she'd been discharged early, but no form had been filed. She paused. I also found this note, left on the tray table. She held up a scan. My name, written in blocky, uneven scrawl. I believe it was forged. I knew her handwriting. This wasn't it. Gasps echoed across the room. Then came the overlay. Timestamps from the footage. The hospital's discharge logs showing no official release. Raina's internal report 1 shed filed quietly that day. But that had mysteriously disappeared from the system until she submitted a printed copy last week. The judge looked up slowly, eyes unreadable. "Enough," she said. The family's petition was denied on the spot. An emergency motion was filed to investigate potential medical misconduct and inheritance fraud. The room buzzed like a hive cracked open. I sat motionless. No fist pump, no glare toward the defense table where my mother, father, and sister sat like mannequins. I just breathed. Later that evening, back in my apartment, I opened the voicemail folder. There were over 50. I listened to just one from last year. My mother's voice saying, "Don't overreact, Danica. You always do this. You always push people away." Then I hit delete. And the next one. And the next. Until they were all gone. No backup this time. I sat on the balcony as dusk rolled in, letting the noise of the city melt into the hum of crickets and a neighbor's soft music from an open window. No more filing. No more evidence. Just breath. The truth had been spoken. And I didn't have to shout it anymore. I don't belong in their silence. Morning found me without an alarm. I didn't need one anymore. Not since the noise had gone quiet, not in the world, but in me. 3 weeks had passed since the hearing. 3 weeks since the courtroom tilted, and gravity shifted back to where it always should have been. I'd moved. Nothing extravagant, just a second-floor walk-up on the east side. The walls were still bare, boxes stacked in corners, a new kettle on the stove. But the silence here was different. It didn't press down on me. It didn't ask questions or whisper doubts. It just let me breathe. Then came the headlines. Woman silenced by family uncovers forgery scandal. Hospital abuse and legal power. The Everett case opens national dialogue. No photo, no interview, just facts. They never printed my face. I never gave them a quote. But the internet did what it always does. It filled in the blanks, memes, hashtags, comment wars. Some believed I was a martyr. Others said I must have been dramatic, manipulative, or mentally unstable to provoke such betrayal. But the facts were the facts. My name was no longer theirs to erase. The court dismissed every claim. The judge's gavel didn't echo, it landed like punctuation. My mother, once a fixture at every charity gala, quietly resigned from all her boards. My sister lost her rights to the inheritance and was served a formal request to repay improperly accessed trust funds. She moved back to Connecticut. No statements, no lawsuits, just retreat. They didn't fight, because the truth was heavier than any lie they'd constructed. A small settlement was offered. Damages, emotional distress, public slander, financial obstruction. I signed the papers, but declined the check. Instead, I had it redirected to a new entity I'd been building in the quiet hours between sleep and sunrise. The Second Voice Foundation, a space for those erased on paper but still screaming in silence. We started with a website. Then came calls. Then Raina joined not as a witness this time, but as a partner. We hosted workshops for nurses about how to identify family coercion. We helped patients apply for protective documentation. We partnered with 2 other legal teams, and before summer's end, we had filed 4 separate cases on behalf of victims across the country. No billboards, no viral videos, just help, quiet, steady, and real. Then one morning a letter arrived. Cream envelope, familiar handwriting. I opened it on the counter, coffee steaming beside me. It was from my mother. 1 page, a strange mix of apology and defense. I didn't know how to love you the way you needed, she wrote. I didn't understand your silence, so I tried to fill it, with plans, with decisions. I see now that it only pushed you further away. I'm sorry. I hope one day you'll understand I was trying to protect our name, not destroy you. There were no tears. I read it once. Then I placed it into the fireproof box under my bed, the one where I kept important documents. ID, titles, court papers. It belonged there, not because I needed it, but because one day I might need to remember how far I'd come. Forgiveness doesn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like distance with dignity. That afternoon, I sat with Raina in our new office space, a secondhand desk, 2 chairs, and a whiteboard already full of ideas. We were preparing for a press inquiry when a volunteer peeked in with an envelope. Someone dropped this off. Said it was from a former patient you helped anonymously. Inside was a note. Your silence saved me. Thank you for screaming when I couldn't. I folded the letter carefully, tucked it into my journal, and looked out the window at a sky no longer gray. Maybe I'll never get the apology I wanted, but I got something better. I got my voice back. Before we close this chapter, let me say this from one voice to another. If you've ever been pushed to the margins, made to feel invisible in your own story, I want you to know, silence doesn't mean surrender. It can be the breath before the breakthrough. I learned that you don't need anyone's permission to exist fully, or to stand up when the world tries to write you out. What matters most isn't who left you behind, but who you become once you decide to stop waiting and start building your own place in this world. In the end, I didn't get the apology I used to cry for, but I got clarity, I got strength, and I got something no one can take away from me again, my voice. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been silenced, underestimated, or left behind by someone you trusted? What did you do with that pain? What would justice look like to you if the apology never came? If this story touched your heart, Drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't quite hit home for you, I'd still love to hear why. Was it the story, the message, the way it made you feel? Your thoughts matter, just like your voice. If you want to hear more stories like this, real, raw, and rooted in truth, go ahead and hit subscribe to the channel. Let's keep building a space where voices don't disappear, they grow louder, stronger, and more connected. I'll see you in the next story.